What's up YouTube? Welcome back to Jackal Games, and in this video I want to talk about why horror video games are my favorite game genre of all time. I mean, as you can tell here, these are all horror games. Some of the highlights, I have a lot more, but these are all horror games. So horror games in general, I guess I can kind of talk about survival horror, but horror games in general, because some of these games may not be considered survival horror, but most of them are. But it is my favorite game genre, and I'm going to get into why that is. So let me kind of put these down so I can kind of go over them without them falling over. So to start off my history with horror games, how I even got into them in the first place was the video game Resident Evil 4. So horror games started for me with this game, Resident Evil 4. This was my first horror game as a kid, playing it on PlayStation 2, and I was blown away by this game. It scared me as a kid. That's why it's one of my favorite video games of all time. That's why it's my favorite Resident Evil game of all time, because I started with this one and it was just amazing, you know. Love the game so much. Played it on 360. I even got the PS4 version. If it wasn't for this game, I probably wouldn't be into horror games as much as I am, especially survival horror. Growing up, you know, horror with movies, just horror in general, I've always found it to be so interesting. You know, the way the world is, the way the creatures are in it, just the whole aesthetic of horror, I just love. Even in movies, horror is my favorite genre, and it goes over to video games. And this started it, great game. And there's many more I love as well in terms of horror games. Like, one of my favorite series is the Dead Rising franchise, which, let me get the games out for that. I mean, these are just a few of them, but the Dead Rising series, you know, I got the new one on PS5, the new version of Dead Rising 1, which was really good. I enjoyed it. You know, the original is amazing. I love the original. I mean, these aren't as, I guess, quote-unquote survival horror as the other ones, even though I feel like the first Dead Rising one, I consider it survival horror. And then Dead Rising 2 is really good as well, a really good sequel. This is another one of my favorite franchises that is horror related, you know. I love horror games, you know. I just think they're very interesting. To me, they're the most interesting games, and I love them the most, just because of the aesthetic of horror and also the concept of video games, combining that together, because I really like video games. This is another series that I love that falls under the horror category. This series is amazing. I just find the dark horror stuff the most interesting when it comes to the video game side of things. And a lot of my favorite games and favorite game series is in the horror genre, whether that's Resident Evil or Dead Rising or some others I'll get into. Like, another horror series I love is Left 4 Dead, which that's why I didn't call it survival horror in general with the title. I mean, I don't have Left 4 Dead 1 anymore. I traded it in, which I regret. It was just for money, dumb shit. But it is a good game. I do have the second one. This is another good, really horror game. Great first-person shooter with zombies. It was very unique. This is another awesome game. Another game that I really love. This is another good game, too. And even some other stuff that I was late on is really good, like Condemned Criminal Origins. This is a really good game, too, you know? Whether it be horror games in general, or I guess I'll wait till I get to a specific survival horror game, but this is a good game, too. Or even, like, I was late to the party with this, Silent Hill. Yeah, this isn't the proper version of Silent Hill 2 and 3, but even with the shittiness of the HD collection, I was still able to enjoy 2 and 3. That shows you how good they are as games, if I was able to even enjoy them despite the setbacks of the HD collection. But I enjoyed going through the Silent Hill series, you know. With survival horror games in general especially, I love them because I just like going through a world, following a story, a campaign, surviving against horror and fighting enemies and being set in a horror atmosphere. I never get tired of that. Whether it's like some of the Resident Evil games or games like this, or even Dead Rising 1 technically, I just love it. It's great, you know, and these were really fun to go through. I also have another Silent Hill game here. Like, you know, some other Silent Hill games I have Silent Hill Downpour, which it has its problems, but I still did enjoy going through it, you know. Like I said, the Silent Hill series, another really good series. I also have the new Silent Hill 2 remake on PS5, which this was fun to go through. This is really good. I think survival horror is really alive and back in action, especially on PS5. You know, really good game. And then another horror slash survival horror game that I really love, that's one of my favorites, is The Evil Within. Very underrated game, one of my favorites. It's the spiritual successor to Resident Evil 4. I love this game. It's one of my top 10 favorite games. Love the atmosphere of it, love the gameplay. I've just always enjoyed these kinds of games the most out of any game genre. It's not to say I don't like other game genres, but it's just my favorite. I played this on 360, loved it, played it on PS4. Just a really good game, another survival horror game I love, you know. And I do have other, you know, Resident Evil titles here. Like, you know, I got Resident Evil 4 remake for PS4. It was a good remake of Resident Evil 4, you know. Resident Evil 7, I need to do an updated thoughts on this because I actually ranted on this back in the day on my main channel, but I don't hate it as much as I used to. Another good survival horror game. You know, Resident Evil 2 remake, another good survival horror game. Resident Evil 3, it has its issues, but I think it's still pretty fun, you know. Just more good survival horror stuff. And that's like a lot of the game collection I have in terms of like my favorite game genre. I just love survival horror / horror games the most because I just find them to be the most interesting and compelling. I love horror, and you combine it with video games and you get a great mixture, you know. Like, just a lot of these games are really fun, to be honest, you know, whether it be on the Resident Evil stuff on PS4 or, you know, some of the 360 horror stuff, or, you know, some of the PS5 stuff, you know. Just a really good genre in my opinion, and I absolutely love it. You know, I wanted to do a video talking about this genre, just doing a discussion on it, why I love it. It's my favorite, you know. That's why I have so many games from it, and I'm glad this genre is alive now more than ever, especially with PS5. I mean, we've had so many horror games, survival horror games. It's back in action, which is nice. So yeah, it's just a discussion video I wanted to make about like survival horror and horror games. Let me know what you think of this genre below, some of your favorite games. But yeah, that's all I gotta say in this video. Peace out.